Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Love Pod. It is Dina, of course. Today, we have one special guest and one special host returning. So first, I want to welcome Jordan back from vacation. Jordan, we have missed you
Yay!
so much. I don't know if I can emphasize that enough.
I'm so happy to be back.
Oh, good. And then our other very special guest, you know him, you love him, or you love to hate him. That's on you, is Nick Thompson from Love is Blind. Nick, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dina and Jordan, for having me on. And yes, I've somehow become a very polarizing figure. So there's probably some hate listeners, but that's okay because they love you guys. So that's what's important.
Oh, we hope so, but I'm sure we have the same. So that's okay.
And Jordan, I've just noticed this when I was listening to you get reintroduced. I love your Christmas tree in the background. That's
Thank you.
Mine have the snow on it too. I just think it's so cool to see when you're in the holiday season.
They are my favorite, but they are the messiest thing you'll ever have to deal with.
100%.
I put my tree outside. So that way we don't have. Well, we have a cat, and I always fear that he's gonna destroy it. So it goes on the front porch. Yeah.
Oh wow.
And 3 dogs.
Where are you from?
I'm from New York, but I live in Arizona now. So no snow here. Yeah.
Lucky you.
Not during the summers, but
in Chicago. Oh yeah. Well, I've seen the melted garbage cans and cement that will melt the soles of your shoes.
Oh,
I've got friends that live down there.
Yeah. I had that happen to me a few years ago. I had to hop into Target 1 foot. But that is not why we're here today.
Hey, at least they didn't kick you out. No shoes, no shirt, no service, right?
That is true. I think they saw the struggle and were like, you know what? You've ridden in here enough with both shoes on. So we can let it slide. Jordan, do you want to get us started today?
Yes. So, Nick, we all know, but we're just going to, in case anybody's listening that doesn't know who you are, you're from season 2 of our favorite show, the show that started our show, Love is Blind. And we want to talk a little bit here to start about before you went on Love is Blind. Did you watch season 1 before you knew about you were going to be on it?
I did, but I had so everybody was talking about Love is Blind during COVID, right? Because I think it came out maybe a few weeks before everybody got locked in their houses and just binged everything they could possibly find. So I had heard of it, and then I was reached out to on LinkedIn by a casting agent who asked me if I had heard of the show and if I'd be interested in talking about possibly being cast. And so as I was starting that casting process, and I think I talked to her, maybe it was that day or the next day for 15, 20 minutes. And then after that, we were in the holidays. It was coming into December. So I know I had a few other of the casting interviews. And during that time, I watched season 1, which, I'm not really a reality TV connoisseur. I knew about it. I watched very little of it. But the preconceived notions I had about dating shows kind of made me chuckle about it. And I even had friends years ago that tried to convince me to apply to The Bachelor. So it was funny to me because my preconceived notions were kind of thrown out the window when I watched season 1. I actually thought, oh, this is different. This isn't like the season of The Bachelor that I watched, or what you hear about shows like Bachelor in Paradise or other shows where it's just everybody kind of being dramatic and hooking up with one another. And, maybe people aren't there for what some might consider the right reasons of finding love. So once I saw it and I saw, obviously Lauren and Cameron, and then the Barnetts, Amber and Matt, I thought, oh, there's actually people making genuine connections in here. And, maybe this is a good way to go about trying to find someone, because it eliminated a lot of the critiques and experiences that I had in the dating world.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And you kind of answered my second question, was about whether you were recruited or if you applied. So you were recruited. And did you say that was on Instagram?
You would think it was on LinkedIn, but
okay,
where everybody goes to find love.
Right, exactly. But that was my most active social media, just because of my career and some of the things that I like to share on there. So I felt like when you look at it from the perspective of like, where do you get an idea of who I am, you would probably see it more there than on my Instagram. Because at the time I had a couple hundred Instagram followers and probably 10 pictures of my dog. And that's close to about it.
Okay. So that sounds like just like my Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't on dating apps at the time. I know some people got recruited off of dating apps too.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I know that this show was pretty new at the time, but had you heard anything about the production process before going on the show?
So interestingly enough, I knew quite a bit about production in reality TV. My degree is actually in business, but it's focused on entertainment. And I was getting that degree in 2008, 2009, 2010, which was when the reality TV boom happened. So as I was like working on my projects and my thesis papers and all of this stuff and presentations, like everyone was talking about all the new reality TV shows. So I kind of almost by being in that time frame and being in school for what I was for, I had sort of like a background on how these shows worked, how they were produced, how people would, survive them in a sense. But I hadn't really spent a lot of time looking into it until I started getting cast here. And there really weren't that many things that you could find online. And I didn't reach out to anyone, which was in retrospect probably something that I should have done, now that I know a lot of people reach out to me and other cast members. But what I had really had from my interpretation was that it's heavily manipulated. There's a lot of editing that goes into it. And I know like what you're seeing isn't always an accurate representation of what happened. Like it's not a documentary crew following you around and just capturing, your everyday life. You're actually put in these manufactured, oftentimes predetermined situations that you may or may not be in your real life. But, what I didn't account for was, the long days, the isolation, like what you would think about what it would be like versus what it actually is like. And for me, that was really something I don't think until you experience it, you can even understand. Even if I tell you, I still don't think until you go through it and your body and your mind go through it, it's almost impossible to understand.
It's funny. I had very long time ago back in college interned for this reality show, Big Men on Campus, which was like a ripoff Bachelor.
God, I remember that. Yeah.
Do you? Nobody ever remembers that one. Like the college version of The Bachelor. And I didn't realize how staged everything was until I started working on it. And it was like they already knew who the end couple was going to be. And, we're manufacturing scenarios like that. And then it kind of like blocked out in my mind. And as I keep watching and hearing your story and the other stories from cast, it's like, oh yeah, this is really not reality.
Systemic. Yeah. Well, what's funny about that is I had these, as time went on and you're in it, like you don't see and you get tunnel vision because you're recording when you're in the pods and stuff, 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day. Then you're kind of like being shuffled around to where you go, even when you get back. Right. So there's very little time for you to sit and reflect on what's going on. And then since I got married, I had, the challenges that continued, right? Like, how do you integrate your lives together? How do you introduce each other to family and friends and say, hey, we got married on a reality show. By the way, you can't talk about it. We can't talk about it. Very few people are allowed to know. And if they do know, they're not allowed to know what show. Like, all of these things that you've got to kind of like manage all while you're figuring each other out. Like, should we move in together right away? Should we, slowly pace ourselves and, start kind of like dating in real life? Because when they're gone, you're just like dropped back into reality without any real like playbook, right? And so from my perspective, it took a long time for me to look back on it and see like, wow, like for example, I think because I tried to talk them out of casting me. Like, I don't think I'm what you're looking for. I can't tell you how many times I said that. I'm like, I'm not dramatic. I'm very confident. You're not going to manipulate me into doing or saying things that I wouldn't do or say in real life. So I was trying to talk them out of it. I'm like, hey, I'm like very politically active was something that I said. Like, I'm very involved in my neighborhood. I like to talk about ideas, not people. Like, these are the things that I would tell them. And I was like, why are they casting me in this show? Like, I kept asking that. And, my therapist was like, well, it's because you're ready for marriage and they need people that are like ready for marriage to complement the people that maybe aren't. And so when she said, I was like, okay. And she even jokingly, said, I know you're going to come back in 3 weeks engaged. And I said, I'm keeping my appointment with you for next week. So I can tell you what it's like when I go home after the first day. And, needless to say, she was right. But it was in that retro time where I look back on it and I actually think I was cast for that. I think that they casted me and a couple of the other gentlemen who didn't make it very far because they needed people that were maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit further along in their career, financially stable. Because, in this experiment specifically, like you need the success stories, or at least I thought you needed the success stories at the time so that you can keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think I was kind of typecast for that role.
Yeah.
We don't see a lot of that. I don't think, at least in season 5, like it didn't seem like a ton of people were genuinely there for marriage, in my opinion.
I can't watch it. I tried watching the first episode of season 3 and it was just like, that was bad timing. I was just going through my divorce.
Yeah.
So it was super like depressing.
You didn't miss much. You didn't miss much.
I've heard, but I have plenty of people that brief me. And then I think I've talked to cast members from every season at this point, at least every season from this point. But season 5 sounds like it is the clout chasers on steroids coming in strong like a bull in a china shop. But I got to tell you, those conversations were even happening on my season. Right. And it's people. And I remember I'm like, oh, I'm listening to this conversation and I'm not going to say who, but it was like, oh, you need to get engaged. You need to lock someone down because you got to go to Mexico. The further you go, the more famous you get, the more followers you get, the more money you make. And I'm like, I remember one point, I'm like, I don't think you guys are here for the right reasons, but I would say maybe I wasn't there for the right reasons, right? Like, why do people go on these shows in the first place? I was a little ignorant.
Okay, fair enough.
Do you have any weird stories about casting?
I do. So this is my favorite because I got so confused. So I got sent. So everything's very hush hush, right? I told my sisters, I told my like close best friends that this was going on, and then when I was finally cast, I told them like I'm cast, like I'm going in like a month. So the interesting thing there is I had this small group of people that know. They go to, at least before, this is questionable in this last season, through extreme lengths to make sure that you have no idea who else is going on the show. I remember going to the airport and looking around and being like, that person looks like they're going to be on it. That person looks like they're going to be on it. And sure enough, all the guys were on the same flight, right? And you don't realize that until you get there and you're all huddled around, the person you're supposed to be looking for. But before that, like a week before that, they still hadn't given you your travel itinerary. You don't get it until, if I remember correctly, like 2 or 3 days beforehand. I was thinking to myself during that time, I'm like, I don't think I'm actually going. Like, this is weird that I don't have my itinerary. I get the itinerary, I open it up and it's someone else's. So I did know one of the dudes that was going to be on the show. He didn't get a lot of airtime. He went home after a few days. I did know him. And I remember I Googled him and looked on his website, went to his LinkedIn and all of that. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So that's kind of like probably my weird story. The other, there's the whole process is kind of funky because there's like several interviews, different types of interviews. And one of them you have to do, and I think this is partially because it was COVID, so everything was on Zoom, right? But one of them I had to like get, dressed to your personality. We're going to ask you a lot of the questions.
Like naked.
No, well, that's another. So actually, that's an even better story. So
it's a different show.
More than. But to finish that story, like you had to like, and this was really prepped to see if you could do this on camera, right? They kind of make you answer questions like in a bubbly way and say it in a certain way and re-say your answer this way because they were like editing sizzle reels of you to present to Netflix, is my understanding of it. But the other one that was funny was, what did you say? No, I had just thought.
Oh, you were talking about how you had to dress up and that.
Oh, yeah. So you have to submit photos of yourself, friends, exes, family, all of that stuff. And they asked for like, I think like stuff in like pictures in the gym. And I went and I like, it was COVID, so I was working out at home, right? I didn't have a gym membership, so I went to my friends as a partner, right? And I'm like, okay, but like you got to film me working out and all this stuff. Submit that, and then they were like, "Do you have any pictures of like you on the beach?" And I'm like, "Maybe." So I like start scouring for photos of like, you know, me on, and finally I'm like, I don't have any of me on the beach. And so then they're like, I basically they kept asking me for different, and I basically got, are you like looking for like naked or topless picture of me? Because I can just take that if that's what you're looking for. Because it was like it was like a weird, it's like a weird roundabout way. Every photo I send them like wasn't working. So there's some weird casting stories. It's definitely it's an interesting process, and it had a lot of twists and turns, I would say.
Okay. So now we know a little bit about I feel like we could do a whole episode about just casting itself. Totally. But during filming, I know you're very vocal about what the process was like and, you know, the difficulties. What do you think the hardest part was?
I think the hardest part, there's two like frames of mind, and I alluded to this earlier. Like when you're in it, at least for me, like I was in it. I was day to day, like I'm making life-altering decisions. I'm doing it with very little sleep, inadequate food and water for my liking. I'm exhausted. I'm stressed because I'm choosing whether or not I'm going to get engaged to someone. Then I'm choosing whether or not, you know, I'm going to have a physical relationship with someone. Then I'm choosing whether or not I'm going to marry this person. And you have all this information. It creates like this pressure cooker environment. So at the time, it's just staying level-headed. And every person that I talk to and I've talked to people for hours and hours that are cast in the casting process, whatever that is. And what I try to emphasize to them is it is very hard in the moment to keep your eyes on the prize, and not the prize of like making it to the end or whatever, but like the prize of making the best decisions for you, because you're mentally exhausted, you're physically exhausted, you're off your normal structure that kind of keeps us sane, which I don't think we all kind of understand how important it is for us to go to work, take our dogs out, you know, go do whatever it is for dinner, like when you eat when you want, drink when you want, you know, all of that stuff. We take it for granted until you're in a situation like this where you don't have the options to do that. So that's in the moment. Post, when I look back on it, I think it was like, oh my goodness, like these situations were so manufactured in some cases. And, you know, I look at the day that Danielle and I had to try wedding cakes, and like my dad's dog had died that day. And my dad's like single, and his dog was everything, and it was unexpected, and it was an emergency thing that happened overnight. And, you know, my sister said, like, you know, my dad told me on Thanksgiving he listens to my podcast now, so I feel like weird talking. I'm like, how'd you learn how to listen to a podcast? Someone at work, I think, showed it. But
Hi,
so
Nick's dad.
you know, so my sister said this is the first time she's like ever seen him cry, and like none of us had ever seen him cry. So he was he's still to this day is heart. And at the same time, and this is her story to tell, but Danielle had, you know, a family emergency, and neither one of us wanted to be tasting wedding cakes. Yeah. Wouldn't it have been beneficial maybe to see how, you know, weird, right? That's the first time maybe you meet my family, but like, wouldn't it have been beneficial to see how we, you know, interact in those situations? And we're sitting there tasting wedding cakes, right? And it's like, that was like, my head wasn't there. My eye was off the prize, if you will. Hers wasn't there. You know, we're talking about things we don't want to talk about. We're both irritable, you know, and want to be someplace else. So I think you look at those things, and to me, I think people really, you know, until you kind of go through that, you don't really realize how manufactured some of these things are.
I mean, is that something, because you're still early in the process, essentially dating, when you guys are picking out wedding cakes, is that something you guys try to support each other through, or is it still such a new thing for you both that you're just kind of like in your own corners dealing with your own stuff?
So that's what I think is so interesting about like why it couldn't have been, let's see what each other need in these kinds of scenarios, and let's see if we can be that for each other. But instead, you know, we go argue about wedding cakes. Like it's just such a disconnect from reality that I think like those are the things too, when you're in a relationship or you're on a relationship building show, like those are the things that are real life, right? Like me being able to say what I need in that situation, her being able to say what she needs in that situation, me being able to say what I can say and show what I can do for her, her being able to say and show what she can do for me, because, you know, either we need to communicate that we need something different, or we need to realize you can't be there in the ways that you need in that, you know, those trying times for one another. And I think that would have helped us build stronger and healthier, like, conflict resolution skills, or, you know, support resolutions or anything like that, instead of sitting there arguing about whatever we were arguing about that had absolutely nothing to do with why we were in the state of mind we were in.
And a lot of people, at least I've spoken to, have talked about, like, the fans want to see the drama. They want to see you guys arguing. They want to see, but I think there's a huge element of fans too who do want to see the real life, genuine relationships. And there's supposed to be, in my opinion, a balance of, like, you know, your Laurens and Camerons, and then your, like, Stacey's and Izzy's, right? Where, like, sometimes it's just a hot mess for drama, and then sometimes there is a genuine connection, because a lot of the seasons lacked, like season 5, one wedding, you know, 3 engagements, one ended in the honeymoon or pre-honeymoon or whatever. But we are part of, like, a big Love is Blind fan group, and people always complain about, like, the lack of genuine connections when there are seasons without them. So I would, at least as a fan, if Netflix is listening, love to see things like that, because those are things you have to navigate in real life. And sometimes that's more interesting than picking out a wedding cake. You know, like,
Right.
I wish we would have seen that.
I agree with you, but I think the forgotten piece of that, and this is where I think we can have both. We're dramatic, right? Like, I'm being dramatic with my facial expressions as I'm telling you these stories. Like, we're dramatic as a species. Like, you're gonna get the drama, and not only are you gonna get the drama, you're gonna get, like, good, probably more relatable drama. But then you can also support the real life situations, because that's the whole point when reality TV started, was like, let's kind of make, you know, people's stories attainable, and let's make them relatable, and let's make them not scripted, right? And so we've gotten to this point, and this is where I compare it literally to the Hunger Games, because we're now putting people in, escalating, every season escalates into chaos, and there's so much that went on behind the scenes for season 5 that just is, I mean, I just want to scream to the world, like, are you paying attention yet? Like, you're being duped into watching your fellow human beings be exploited, abused, sexually assaulted, stripped of basic human rights and autonomy. And you're sitting there and you're watching it and you're judging people about it. Like, this is turning you against your fellow people, and in terms of, like, exploitation for entertainment. And is that really where we want to go, and how we want to continue down this path? Because I can only listen. I know some stuff that's happened on seasons that have filmed and that haven't aired yet, and it doesn't get any better. If anything, it escalates to similar, if not worse, types of scenarios. Of course, who knows how they'll be edited and played out, or if they'll even get edited in the show at all.
Do you think that discourages people from applying, or do you think the opportunity for influencers and fame is, like, just so bright that people really don't care?
I think that's a great question. Again, we could probably explore this
forever. I know
forever.
We kind of sidetracked from the scripted conversation, but I don't
No, that's
not
okay.
Scripted, but we do have a list of questions for you, but this is interesting.
Of course. Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. I think there are people, and I know there are, because I wouldn't have people asking me for a conversation if they weren't hesitant, right, or concerned. You know, even funnily enough, 2 of my friends who have been together, I think a year and a half now, were in the recruitment process for the Ultimatum Queer Love season 2. Okay. And they asked me, obviously, like, they follow me, they know, like, which is also very weird. They got reached out to on Instagram, and it's like always me commenting on their photos and liking them. And it's like, are you even looking at who they're friends with? Like, but anyway, they opted not to do it. But, like, just hearing the things that they get told, and the way that it's presented, the way it was presented to me and everyone was very, sorry, my dog.
It's okay.
Hey.
No, we love it. My dog's sitting right here too. You're good.
Good. Okay. So yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I think what is, you know, and what I tell people who, and I honestly think the people that are going to clout chase are going to clout chase. they don't care. Like, they're not there for the reasons of finding love. And again, it's like, well, what is the right reason at this point? Like, I don't know, right? It could probably be a case for either. But, you know, I tell people who reach out to me, and I think they're the ones that think maybe this experiment could work more so than not. And they reach out, and I always tell them, I'm like, here's the thing. You might be there for the right reasons. You might have done the work. You might be ready to find, and it's mostly women that reach out, in honesty. So you might be ready to find love. You may have, you know, conquered all of your trauma from past relationships growing up and feel like you are the best version of yourself. And that's great. You go there, you could thrive. You could meet someone, because I do believe that in a bubble, like, the experiment it works. Like, it can work. We've seen it work. It's where it's the outside influence where I think it gets very kludgy. And we could talk about season 5 and all of that stuff too. But what I think I tell them is, you may be there for the right reasons, but you may be there pairing up with someone who's pretending to be there for the right reasons, pretending to be what you're looking for, all to go further, to get more followers, to get more fame, to make more money, right? Like I said earlier. And you might get to the altar thinking, I found my person. I can't believe this worked. And they might be getting to the altar and thinking, I'm no way going to say yes. I was never going to say yes. I didn't even come in this. I'm not ready for marriage. And they put on the show, right? Or, and then what's the outcome? You get left, and you get the trauma of being left at the altar by someone you thought you were going to spend your life with, because they went there to get the clout or whatever that might be. Or you could end up maybe married to someone who thinks they can do a little bit better in a relationship for the clout than they would on their own. And I'm not saying that's everyone, but I'm saying it's things to consider, because we've seen it, right? People aren't always there to find love. And you can make an argument of what the right reason is either way, I think, but people aren't always there to find love. And that's something you have to be aware of when you're going on these shows, and something you have to be aware of as a viewer.
It's almost like dating on apps or in real life, because people can present themselves to be whoever they want, but then you have this extra element of production spinning people to be who they want. So
Exactly.
It's like you could be ghosted a million times harder, because you're standing there either in a wedding dress or a tux, instead of like on an app where somebody just blocks you or whatever the case may be.
And
But
then you're
you've
doing
got
it in front of the whole world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can see why that would be hard. And to me, it would be hard to like reconcile. Is it worth it for, it's like temporary pain for possible long-term gain where, yeah, you could start making money and you can make coin from this, but is that worth it? I guess if you're not in it for genuine love anyway, then you probably don't care if you get stood up or not, or you are the one hurting somebody, but I just don't think I could do that. Did you feel like,
yeah, and that was, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, all you.
Oh, I was just going to say, that was my whole thing. Like, I went in there and I was like, I think this can work. I don't really have aspirations to be famous, despite like being in 8th grade voted most likely to be famous,
Nice.
which is, yeah, it's hilarious. I got like so many people from junior high sending me the yearbook snap of that.
So you won. You won then? And
I won 8th grade. I won my small little Catholic school's 8th grade.
That showed you. Anyway.
Yeah. So that was it. I had no aspirations for that. And if I ever was going to be famous, it was going to be for my ideas, right? Like, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be, a writer, or I was a journalist in high school and college. So those were kind of my, my core inner desires were to tell stories, right? Tell stories that resonate with people, tell stories that make people think a little bit differently. Or in the journalism space, like uncover stories that make people think a little bit differently. So this was a very kind of weird thing for me, but I went in with the mindset of, because I don't care about fame, because I don't care about clout, because I don't really think I belong here. I'll go in and if I go home the first day after meeting all 15 of the women and didn't connect to any of them, cool. If I end up getting married, I'm going to be fine with that. If I end up somewhere in between, I'll figure that out too. So I just kind of went in with that mindset. And, I had a successful career. I didn't have aspirations to like some people do, to quit my job and influence full time. That's just not in my, that's not in my DNA.
I think the first season of every reality show is usually my favorite. And then it kind of like varies from there. Like this first season of Married First Sight was so genuine. The cast is so great. Like their actual marriages, at least to the viewer. And then,
oh yeah,
Like,
I'm just
Love
thinking
is
about
Blind.
this season. Like this new,
Oh, yeah.
I haven't watched the one airing now, but I know some of the people on it. And
Yeah. I want to hear about that. So from season 1 to season 5 of Love is Blind, like huge difference, right? Can you spot, either in your experience when you were filming or now, like having heard about the cast from the show, can you spot the genuine people from the actors?
so I started, and I mentioned this earlier in the men's lounge, I started kind of realizing like, oh, I'm like, some people are here. And I had a unique situation because Danielle and I connected very quickly, like not as quick as they
Okay.
on the show, but very quickly over the first 3-4 days, we were just kind of like, okay, it's you or go home. And she said that to me first, was very brave about it. And I said, oh, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm just kind of letting it play out. So once that was kind of like official, and it started to change the conversations in the lounge a little bit, of people being like, oh, I got to lock someone down. Like, Nick's going to Mexico. I got to lock someone down. And so, but why? Not because I like someone and I'm afraid I'm going to lose them, but because they wanted to go farther. That being said, some of those people went and, fell in love, whether accidentally or not. That happened. And then of course some people didn't, but I guess that's kind of the thing to consider, right? Like,
Sure.
you may actually be there for, your own reasons, whatever those are, but you could probably also end up accidentally in love.
In your opinion, from what you've seen and heard of all the other seasons, and I have to ask because I'm very curious, but you don't have to answer, is there one person who you think was genuinely ready and in it for marriage, and genuinely not ready and not in it for marriage?
So like I said, I haven't watched, I've only read and
Right.
heard people's
Mhm.
stories. So having talked to so many people, and then like seeing either what's been said about them or seeing what their representation is in the edit, it's hard for me to sort of decipher the two, right? Because like I've talked to people that have been villainized, and their story like is so different than what you saw. And then I've heard people who or talk to people I think like I would say were probably there for the right reasons, but it's so weird because I have two different perspectives, which is like, I
Right.
know the public perspective, but then I know some of the people. And,
Mhm.
I don't really feel like naming anyone and saying they
That's
were or
fine.
weren't there.
That's fine.
Yeah. Who
That's
am
why I
I to
asked
say
from
that?
both perspectives, like anybody who really was ready to commit. Because I will say, Shake had mentioned, and he did this like on the record in the interview, he had said that Deep D suggested they get married for the influencer opportunities. And I have not asked her yet. I have reached out to see if she would come on the podcast. Not even for that, like just in general, because that was a relatively new development. So on the opposite perspective, I'm not asking you to weigh in on that if you don't want to, but like if anybody was genuinely there for the right reasons,
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I think I was there for the right reasons. I
Yeah,
think
that's an
Danielle was there
obvious
for
one.
the right. Yeah, like
Sure.
Danielle was there for the right reasons. I think the other thing that happened, I think people got a little caught up sometimes too. And I think that kind of makes people put a wall up, because here's the thing, like, you get really emotional really quick in ways that you wouldn't in years in real life, right? And you're talking about things, think about it, like, I got married after 7 weeks. Like, you can date someone for 7 weeks and not even be official for 6 more months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's just the state of dating. So that's just kind of like how it is. But I think like getting caught up in the emotions, I think happens to people in a positive way and in a negative way. Like, it helps some people build stronger relationships, and then causes other people to get maybe caught up in the moment. But I do think, like, by and large on my season, I think people I think everyone was open to it. I do think everyone was open to it. And I think some people
Okay.
did get caught up.
Okay.
And then I think in other seasons, especially 3, because I know 3 filmed shortly after us, people still had that season 1 vibe from it going into there. And I think season 4 even filmed before season 2 aired. So maybe them too. So I think there was like a little bit more of a genuine touch to it versus what
Okay.
we just saw
Yeah.
and what's coming.
we're hanging on by a thread for the next season. If it's like season 5, I don't know if I can hang in there anymore. Jordan, I don't know about you. We might have to make this the something else pod because it was a rough ride. But with the bad comes the good too. So do you have any positive memories from your experience?
Yeah, and there's plenty of positives. Like, the one thing I always get asked, would you do it again? Would you do it again? That's such a loaded question. Again, unpack that on a whole, episode or something. But I think like I am blessed to have met someone like Danielle to go through it with, because I don't think I could have with anybody else there. And that's maybe because we fell in love or whatever. But it's hard for me to imagine like doing that with anybody else. And then it's also very difficult for me to imagine even like my life now without having her in it. Right. So it's from that perspective, like it brought the two of us together. And I don't know if you guys we talked about this when the show first came out, like we had so many close encounters in our lives before the show. And I think, whether that ends up, it's going to be something someday more or whatever it's going to be. I think that was like destined to happen. Like I lived above in a 3-flat here in Chicago, her best friend for 4 years, and they were there too, I think. And so she was there like every weekend and never ran into each other. I actually applied and interviewed at her dad's company like 10 years ago where she interned, never ran into each other. So it's just like, it's so weird the different ways that we almost met. Right. And I think that is like a good takeaway. Another thing is they try to tell you that you get paid with a platform, you get paid by followers, right? You get paid by press, which, they don't say that, but that's kind of what's alluded. I should correct that.
Right.
I do think like having a platform, despite everything, I get to normalize some of the things that I think are important to talk about, whether that's through my podcast, whether that's through my social media. And I think that is beneficial to people. And when someone takes the time to stop me on the street, I go back to last January, this younger gentleman, probably early 20s, if I had to guess, walked by me here in Chicago, and he stopped me and he's like, "Thank you for talking about men's mental health. It's like, it makes me feel like it's okay for me to talk about it." And it's like, oh, okay. Like I can actually make someone feel a little bit better just by relating to them on something. So I think like that's a good thing as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to help people.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about your podcast, Eyes Wide Open, because you do address a lot of hard topics that, like you said, men's mental health, like it doesn't get talked about. It doesn't get addressed. And I think.
And gets minimized.
Yeah. Had you not, regardless of what happened during the show, like had you not had that experience, it maybe would not have impacted so many people in the future. I talk a lot, I'm in therapy, and I talk a lot with my therapist about, despite some of the massive trauma that I've been through, it might have changed my path had I not gone through it and been able to, open up about issues like domestic violence and help other people. And so just because you had a traumatic experience with the show doesn't mean that you don't have, like positives to bring into the world now and help other people, which is so much greater of an impact. But we will get to your podcast. We have more questions about Love is Blind. And I know I'm monopolizing so much of the time. So I'm going to let Jordan hop on over because we've covered a lot of this other stuff. So I'm going to let Jordan talk about post-show.
All right. So after the show, I know obviously there's a lot about the show that you would have changed, but is there anything like in particular that you would have changed looking back at it now?
Like looking back on the production process, or like something I would have done different, or
either one.
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say whatever you want to talk about. I think we were like specifically about the show and production, but if you have a better example in like your.
I can give you one. So I said, Danielle and I connected real quickly. We actually had talked I don't know if she had talked to my producer, but I had talked to my producer, but I had also had conversations before I was kind of assigned a producer with the gentleman that ended up being her producer. And when we connected, and they told us this after the fact, after we were back from getting engaged in Mexico, they had mentioned, like, we saw you two connect very genuinely, and we just kind of decided that we would be here if you needed, but we were just going to be hands off. So you guys could just genuinely build your connection. Right. And so when we went to Mexico, we were assuming, and again, assuming like we couldn't talk or anything, but we had both separately assumed like we would have one of our producers who knew our story. They actually brought in a producer that was working on a different show to be our couples producer, which immediately caused like an awkward feeling for both of us. And, you know, which we talked about later, of like, why would they want someone who didn't know our story to come and produce us? And then he even openly and said, I haven't seen any of the footage or know anything other than what some people have told me. And that was when our whole like dynamic changed. And so I wish that one of the producers that had seen our story knew who we were in the pods, and kind of was able to stick to that story instead of put us in some of the other situations that we wouldn't have really been in real life. So I think that's kind of like the one thing that I wish would have been a little bit different there. And then after the fact, I kind of wish, you know, I was so nonchalant about all the attention and stuff like that. But in retrospect, like I wish that I had the wherewithal that I do now to, like, you know, focus on trying to make change while I still had an in, I guess I should say, to really be like, hey, like, there's things here we can do better. You know, we can do better with the food, we can do better with the wall, and like try and like leverage some of those relationships to get some, you know, incremental change. So it wasn't all, you know, worlds on fire kind of thing, like it feels like it's become the last couple months.
Do you feel like you closed that door? Like you just can't?
I never close a door completely on anything, because I feel like people change, situations change. I know with the foundation, we will, we're happy to work with anybody, right? I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time. It's the whole point. One of the whole points of my podcast is like, I want my biases challenged. I want my thought process challenged. I want to hear other people's ideas. So I'm assuming other people are open to that too. And so that's the thing. It's like, I'd be open to these conversations, but the only thing I think I'm going to hear from them is deafening silence.
You might hear something else. I don't know. I don't know that it would be what you want to hear, but
I've heard something else that I didn't really want to hear. But.
All right. Sorry, Jordan. I have so many questions. I could sit here all day.
Go ahead. Ask your questions.
All right. I've got one more about that. Do you think having that other producer changed the outcome of your relationship, or changed how your relationship developed with Danielle?
It definitely changed how the relationship developed in real time. And it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. We were doing things that we wouldn't be doing when certain things were going on in our lives. We would get into arguments that we, you know, maybe in real life had a conflict that we had resolved, but they wanted it for TV. And there's a whole scene where we're like literally acting out the entire scene, because they're like, well, you guys had this conflict, and it was like, yeah, but it wasn't even about this. And then we had to go and like act out this whole conversation in the apartment where we were like, I mean, it was basically, might as well have been scripted, right? So there's those things that I think like really took us out of like building healthy patterns and put us into maybe some not as healthy patterns. So I do think like maybe we would have, you know, it's not worth speculating too much, but I think maybe we would have had a better opportunity if we had, you know, better support throughout the process and better aftercare once the show finished. And then of course, once it aired.
Okay. All right,
which is one of the reasons the foundation exists, so that we can help people post show.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yes, I know. I don't want to jump the gun.
Well, we just have, you know, a couple more questions about after the show. And well, was it last week our episode with Shake came out?
I don't know if it was last week, but it's the last episode we've aired.
Well, Dina just got the chance to talk to Shake, and he discussed your relationship with him during his interview. Is there anything that you want to address about that?
So, I'll say this, like, I know Shake was involved in group activities, and, we all tried to stay kind of connected, especially post filming. And, he and I would never say we were friends. I would say we were acquaintances. Like, we would interact when we were all together. Sometimes in fun ways. Other times I feel like I would try to almost honestly lecture him on some of the things that he would say. But what I will say about Shake is, as time's gone on, and like, I wouldn't call us friends, but I do think he means well. And I actually never didn't think he meant well. I just don't always think he was able to express it in the best ways. But I imagine, he's grown a lot from this. I actually can say that he reached out to me a few months ago with some kind, supportive words over text message. And he is actually one of the only people from the show that did that, while other people opted to talk about it instead of talk to me. So it was very much a humbling moment and I appreciate him for that. I also know I keep in casual touch with Shane as well. And I know that he has been an outstanding supportive friend for Shane with a lot of the stuff that he's gone through. And it kind of, even hearing that from Shane over the last year or so, like, kind of opened up my heart to be like, okay, you know what? Like, maybe I don't agree with everything he says or everything he does. Maybe I would do it differently, but someone who's coming from a good place, I try to judge people. I always try to judge people on their intentions. And like I said, I don't agree with everything he says, everything he does, but I think he is coming from a good place, even if he doesn't always do it the way that I would do it.
Okay.
So I appreciate him for that. And his message, it's still like, it's very humbling that he took the time out of his day, especially after the last exchange we had wasn't very pleasant, to show kindness. And he didn't have to do that. And I wouldn't have thought anything of it.
It is a different side of him we see on House of Villains. Well, at least for the most part, until maybe like the last episode or so.
No.
From what we saw.
I'm tempted. Let me tell you.
Oh my God. It is so good. It is so good. And I think, unlike the Love is Blind and stuff like that, the cast has a lot more, not pull, but like control over their treatment, because they are from other shows and have unpacked that experience. A lot of them are veterans of reality TV. So it's not as bad of it seems like a pretty good experience from them, from what we've heard. But he was so meek in the beginning and so like friendly and kind and open. And you didn't see that in as much in Love is Blind, because he's so blunt and maybe doesn't approach situations the best way, regardless of his intentions. And I know, Jordan, I think you would say the same thing. Like, we're really rooting for him in that show. We're like, what Shake is this? I haven't seen him before, so it does show the multiple sides. And he did mention reaching out to you and that you guys kind of opened that line of communication. So I'm glad that
I was very grateful. I was very grateful. I was like, instead of dancing around, like, I'll just say it. Like, I was in a 30-minute interview, and I mentioned casually that I had job struggles, partially due to the show. And people want to blah, blah, like, they don't know what they're talking about. But the reality is when you're, in the career path that I'm in as a marketing executive in software, you're customer facing, you're analyst facing, you're sales facing, and you have to be an evangelist publicly for the company. That's just the type of role that I'm in, and where I've built my whole career for. And so the questions would come up, through interview processes and stuff, with people saying like, well, what do you do if a customer didn't like you on the show, or read a negative headline about you, or, what is that? And that's a tough question to ask, right? Because there's no training for that, right? I can't block someone who's mean to me on social media, or I can on social media. I can't in real life, who's a customer,
right.
So
oh God, I wish you could. I'd be like,
oh God, wouldn't that be something? someday maybe we'll be able to, like, through our goggles or our Elon Musk chips, we'll just be able to hit like a block.
Total off the cuff, but have you seen that episode? I think it's Black Christmas of or White Christmas of Black Mirror. They do
I've seen all of Black Mirror.
Yeah. So like,
and by the way, if
the
you want
opposite.
Yeah. If you want to see Netflix trolling everybody, watch the last season, episode 1, Joan is Awful. It's literally
Yes.
like,
oh my God.
did you see
so
that
good.
one?
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
oh, so you know that your reality TV productions are actually like dramatic reenactments of things that aren't necessarily true. I mean, it was just like, I watched that and I'm like, I have to be in the metaverse because this doesn't make
I couldn't believe that they like went after themselves like that, basically. Or I don't know if they were
Right?
really went after us like that. Like, yeah, this is all, none of it is real. Everything is a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's hilarious. But
yeah, if anybody
yeah.
hasn't watched Black Mirror at this point, like at least watch that episode, Joan is Awful, because it is, if you love Love is Blind and love reality TV, that is like very eye-opening and Unreal. I don't know if you've seen Unreal, but I think that's pretty.
I've heard of it. I've heard so much detail of it. I do kind of want to watch it.
Oh God, it's so well done. It is amazing. Yeah. And I mean, I think like they go to extremes to tell stories about reality TV. Like there's a death that's covered up and things like that. So sorry, spoiler alert. It's been out like 20 years, guys. I don't know what to tell you. But
if you haven't watched it yet,
there you go. I've ruined the whole show from that one thing. But like the way producers manipulate and kind of back you into a corner, I think is so eye-opening if you aren't familiar with like behind the scenes of reality TV. So if you haven't seen it, definitely watch. And fans of these shows, like you have to watch it. You just have to. It's so good. But anyway, back to our show.
Yeah. But just to wrap up, just this post show little segment, and then we can get into your podcast and all this other stuff. But you've been really open about your experience and, you know, how production has impacted your life. And so how are you doing now? Has that gotten better?
Yeah, it has. It did. I guess this is, unless you follow me on LinkedIn, breaking news. I did finally find a job. Doing what I've been working my whole career towards, that I've been very proud of. So that's been a pleasant surprise. Not surprise. That's been a pleasant change, I guess. Especially being able to share, you know, like this is a part of me. This isn't who I am, right? Like I decided or made the decision to go on the show. I made the decision to, you know, not shill a bunch of products that I would never use or never, you know, which whoever does that, to each their own, right? Like maybe that's your, I'm never going to begrudge anyone for making their money. So, you know, it was a struggle to kind of be like, wow, I like gave up my career for this, for something that, you know, has just really traumatized me and made me, you know, feel not like myself for a very long time. So I am coming back. I do feel, you know, I'm a Taurus. I'm very stubborn. I also have a lot of conviction. And when I have a personal ethos of doing the right thing. And, you know, I think oftentimes I look around and I'm like, something's wrong. Someone should say something. And if no one will say something, like, I guess I'll do it. Right. So that's kind of like become my conviction, where I'm trying to turn all of the struggles I had, you know, which I don't blame the show or production for everything, despite what you might read in the slanderous headlines. I've never said that. I actually said quite the opposite. But, you know, it's a piece of it, right? And that's the things that people struggle with, like this whole situation. It really changes and impacts your life in ways that you never would. Like I didn't get a bad edit. I did have some bad headlines over the years, but who hasn't coming out of these? But you know, I can't even imagine what it's like for someone like, honestly, you know, Shake or someone else who's been edited into a villain, and what that can do to your career and what that can do to your mental health, whether you said it and did it or you didn't say it and do it. I think that that's something that I look at this all and I'm like, well, I have conviction. I'm very stubborn. I have to do the right thing. And I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I wasn't trying to make this better for the people that are coming into reality TV.
Sorry, my laptop's going to die. And
oh, no worries.
I'll edit this. I'm just asking my boyfriend to bring my phone charger up from the guest room. I had to, since we're packing, I had to use the plug from my phone to plug in the mic. But anyway,
fast.
No, not at all.
Mic, not computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was charging my computer and I couldn't get we have 3 microphones and I couldn't get the USB ones to work. So anyway, he's going to pop in a second, hopefully, and bring me up my other mic. So I didn't want you to think I was being rude by texting, but I also didn't want to be rude by completely cutting this recording off. So you stepping up to help really is kind of a good segue into this next line of questions, really, because you found UCAN, the Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network? Did you co-found that, or is it just something that you kind of...
I co-founded it with Jeremy Hartwell and Dr. Isabelle Morley, who's our resident psychologist and director of mental health services. Jeremy had the idea for a long time, and he was pitching it to me for probably almost a year. And I was just like, he had a little bit different idea in mind. And I kind of was like, I just really don't want to, I want out of this. Like, I don't want to be in this world anymore. It's not meant for me. It's, really disrupted my life and everything that I had worked so hard for. And then as I met Dr. Isabelle, actually, she wrote an article in Psychology Today last year. And I did a very thorough interview with her for several hours about the whole process. And that was when I really started it was almost like journaling in a sense, where I really started to realize like how messed up this was and how much this had impacted me from where I was mentally, financially, career-wise, even, love-wise, because I was devastated at the time, that this was messed up and that there wasn't the right systems, regulations, all of this stuff in place. And then I remember I'm like, well, for my own wellness at the end of the year last year, I'm like, I have to shut off social media for a little bit. So I shut it off for over a week. I have to get like out of this. I don't want to do interviews about my divorce. Like, I don't want to do interviews about whether I'm dating again. I don't want to do interviews about what so-and-so said about me on some stupid podcast. Not all podcasts are stupid. This one's wonderful. But, when you hear people talking about you and not talking to you, it's very frustrating. And then I just decide, I'm like, for my own wellness, I got to get out of this world. This is not my people. So, I got involved in my community. I worked on, some political campaign here in Chicago for the mayor, which was, those are things I like to do. I stopped worrying about my following and, how could I monetize it? And because I didn't really care to do that. I stopped thinking about, all of the trauma that came from this and how I opted not to financially, blow up my bank account from it. And I was like, I'm just going to go forward. And this is kind of where I got the podcast. I'm like, I'm going to go forward with my eyes wide open, right? I am not looking backwards anymore. I am looking forwards. And as time went on, I started to, reflect on everything. And literally Business Insider reached out. They were doing an expose. I marinated the reporter for a while because I wasn't sure I wanted to go in it, back into it, because I was actually starting to feel like myself again. And then I agreed to do it because I just kept thinking about what this did to Danielle and I and how I felt like we weren't set up for success. And, what they did to her, what they did to me, what they did to us, what they were doing to others from a mental health perspective. And that's when I went to Jeremy and was like, this has to be more than providing legal support. Like, we have to make sure people are okay, right? Because these companies, despite what they say, they are not providing, in my opinion, adequate mental health support for people in actually going through this pre, during, and post show. Knowing what you're signing up for is one thing. Experiencing what you've signed up for is something completely different. And that is something you can't understand until you experience it. So I wanted to bring these elements to it. And I wanted to make sure that, a couple like Danielle and I who needed support, and we spent months looking for it, trying to get help from them, trying to, and it was COVID. We just couldn't find a counselor on our own to help us navigate some of the bad habits that we had built, in some cases from production. And so I was like, I don't want that to ever happen to anyone again. And so if Jeremy, if you let me kind of lead the charge on this mental health side of it, and I will join the foundation, and I will I can't do it full time. I don't want to do it full time. It's a lot. It's emotionally heavy, but I will be someone people can talk to from other shows. And so from there, we kind of went forward with it. Didn't expect it to blow up as it did. But, for all of his, what I would call horrible takes, Nick Viall gave us his spotlight unintentionally, and created a whole lot of extra attention on the foundation, which was very beneficial for us to sort of kickstart. But that was really where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I have to put my mark on it. And then I, told them, I'm like, there's some things that I want to fight for, like unionization efforts, which is much more in my alley, right? I've been organizing since Obama in 2008. And, I'm like, this is more in my wheelhouse. So if I can talk about that and I can, use my platform to advocate the foundation and use my platform to advocate for change and use it to be someone that people who are going through it can actually relate to. And Jeremy has some of that, right? But he was only there 3-4 days of filming. So he can only go so far. Like, he didn't get married on the show. He didn't get divorced in the public eye. He didn't, all of that stuff. So that was kind of where it started. And it really was a game time call. And I remember, the day before the Business Insider article came out and I was talking to him on the phone. I'm like, I know this is your brainchild and I just put my stamp on it, but like, I'm going to have to be like kind of a co-founder if we're going to actually, do this, because as stupid as it is, like, people are going to want to talk to me because I lived it,
Yeah. Which makes sense. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is a relatively new, in the span of like change and impacting organization. You were on season 2. It was a few years ago that you guys had this experience and went on to found UCAN. So do you feel like there have been changes to the industry or that you're making headway? And what are some of those?
That's a really great point. There has been, we had our board meeting Wednesday, right? And sitting there and looking at like our accomplishments, like Giving Tuesday, we raised more money in that day than we had raised forever. And, on that note too, there's some misinformation out there. A lot of it comes from the mouths of people that, again, won't talk to me, but want to talk about me. We're not like paying for people's therapy. Like, people have no idea. Running a not-for-profit is a full-time job, right? Like, we all volunteer our time and resources. It got off the ground because we all funded it ourselves, right? And that isn't something that is sustainable, right? Because it requires a lot of work. We have, 400 mental health professionals that all need to be vetted and put into a database and managed, and all of these. Same with the lawyers. We have, I don't know how many exactly. Actually, I think we're up over 5. We have like over 500 lawyers and mental health professionals.
Jeez.
Yeah,
that is a lot of people to manage. Like, no matter what.
Yeah. Right. And so like, there's things like that. And then, the same way, at some point we'd like to get to this point, but these things are used for the funds used for operational things, right? They're used to pay for the website. They're used to pay for press releases of these accomplishments. So we've gotten so many people in our network. And I think that is the like giant opportunity that I didn't see happening so quickly. That was our first huge accomplishment, to be like, hey, people are especially in the mental health and legal space, are looking at this and being like, yeah, this is messed up. There's little things that are arbitrary in a sense, but a couple weeks after the foundation, I heard from several people on Netflix shows that they started receiving mental health check-in calls, which nice. I think is, again, will they ever accredit that to the work we're doing? No, right. But I don't think that was something that would have necessarily happened without, right? I have heard now, despite what they say, we'll just agree to disagree on whether or not they offered adequate help. They are giving therapy to people from season 4 and 5 that I've confirmed.
Oh, that's amazing.
With. Yes. So I've confirmed. Now there's time limits on that, and that's okay. But I think that's something that's super important, and they're paying for it. Like, they're not providing it, which is even better because you want it to be independent of anything going on there. So we've had those things. So for the unionization efforts, obviously, like, Bethenny Frankel has led the charge on the bigger conversation about it. But we've taken big steps with the Teamsters, adding a director from the Teamsters, which is one of the top largest unions in the world, adding to our board of directors, who's guiding us through like what needs to happen in order for unionization efforts to happen. So with that, I've filed complaints and charges against Kinetic with the National Labor Relations Board, which they are being investigated for violations of labor practices and contracts that are insanely predatory and could be considered illegal soon. So there's elements like that of change in the industry through advocacy and following the proper protocols to change like regulation and laws around what is a reality cast member. Are they a contractor? Are they an employee? And there's precedents and laws on a state by state and federal basis that may indicate that we are actually employees for the amount of time that we are filming because of the level of control they have over you. So there's like several things that go on in the background, I would say. Also been in contact with several state legislators in various states about potential legislation to regulate some of the reality TV production, especially around labor, because again, they've escaped any type of regulation and labor laws in this industry for whatever reason it is. Part of it is the predatory contracts that silence people. But, just those types of moves on the activism side have been huge for us. And then there's little things like our Instagram account has over, I think we might be at 4,000 followers, which is, we're not for profit. And it's basically been like the three of us, doing all of this until recently. So we've had like these little accomplishments. And when you look at it, from a bigger perspective, and we've achieved a fiscal sponsor, which is great because we can accept donations
Congrats.
that can then be write-offs. Yeah. And we've qualified for our 501c3, which makes all donations tax deductible. We're waiting for the official like badge from the government, who takes forever to do anything. So there are all these little accomplishments that we have that may not be obvious to the casual viewer or casual person paying attention, but change is here. It's not even coming. And when is this going to air?
So we were just talking about that. It's probably going to be in January because we are,
okay.
I personally am so behind, nothing on Jordan, but we have reality. Yeah. January. I'll give you an exact date.
No, the reason I was asking is we actually recorded a couple weeks ago a Nightline on Hulu special that's going to drop next Thursday at midnight. So this was like Bethenny's in it. Jeremy and I are in it. We talk about the foundation. We talk about our experiences. We talk about like goals, and it's going to be probably one of the biggest things for this whole movement, because it's going to be interesting too, because like ABC produced it, obviously. And it's like, wait a minute, you guys have the whole Bachelor franchise. Are you sure you want to do this? But anyway, so I was going to plug that, but I don't know if that makes sense. You might want to just.
Yeah, no, it'll be out before this podcast is. So absolutely plug it. And we're going to ask you again to plug anything you want at the end anyway. So please talk away. And I'm going to, I'm also going to ask you one more question related to UCAN, and then I don't know where he is. So I'm going to turn off my camera and mic and let Jordan ask you the podcast questions.
You want to pause for a minute? I know we scheduled and we're coming up on time. I have another half hour if you want to.
Okay.
If you have time.
I figured since this is like a block of questions for Jordan, I don't have to interrupt.
Okay,
perfect. I can just let it run. So my next question for you is, how can fans help UCAN and help support the efforts? And then I'll pop away for a minute.
Well, first of all, UCAN it stands for Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network. And we have 3 real pillars, right? We want to make sure that people are understanding their legal rights, can know their rights, act on their rights, make sure they have mental health support pre, during, and post show by matching them with qualified mental health professionals in their state, because that is a very state by state laws and regulations about who can be a therapist and such. So we're vetting people for that, so we can make sure we can connect people with mental health professionals. And then the advocacy piece. So if you have the ability to donate, again, it's totally tax deductible. We appreciate it. I also recognize not everyone's in a financial space to give, and they may already have their places they give, all of that, no pressure. But the advocacy piece is where everybody can help immediately. Follow us on Instagram at the UCAN Foundation. I think we'll put the link here, hopefully. But just follow us, interact, share it. Support the advocacy piece of it any way that you can. Share episodes like this in your network so people can learn what's going on and really have a better understanding of how exploitative and Hunger Games like reality TV has become.
All right. I know definitely we will share the links, at least in the show notes. I don't know how to share them on the screen, but we'll try. We'll try.
You don't have to do that.
I will be right back. Jordan, feel free to take over while I go hunt down a charger.
Okay. All right. So just real quick, I know you talked a little bit earlier about your podcast, Eyes Wide Open. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I started my podcast, which is something I've wanted to start for like 10 years, and it's had many iterations before becoming what it is now. And when I first started it, I wanted to have conversations that remove barriers between people, right? I have this fundamental belief that we are all human beings first, and that we need to find a way to look at each other despite our experiences, despite our biases, and despite our judgment, and look at each other as human beings first, because that's how we can all come together, even in disagreement. And so the purpose of my podcast initially was to remove stigmas around mental health, around people, individuals, biases, and anything that we have against our fellow human being, and also be educational, right? To normalize some of these things that are very stigmatized to talk about or think about, especially in, the mental health and news and politics phase. And as I took a little break from the show to plan for season 2, and I was sort of in my phase of, okay, I'm going to go through life now with my eyes wide open, because, going through blind landed me in this horrible situation. Then I was thinking, I'm like, okay, I'm going to rebrand the show to Eyes Wide Open, and we're going to tackle these topics, but we're also going to tackle other topics, such as having, mental health experts, right? Coaches, anybody who's got a personal experience that I think would help humanize. But we're also going to start talking to reality TV cast members about what their experiences are, what they want to see changed, or what they think is good. The people that flock to this tend to be people who have had a pretty bad experience. And so I've had several cast members from shows across the entire globe to come on and discuss what their experience was like, changes that they want to see in the industry, again, to kind of humanize people that have maybe been edited as a villain, or people that have maybe been, completely had their lives disrupted. And it's a good way to teach people the impacts that they have, the impacts these shows have on people. And again, try and normalize them and make everybody remember, hey, these are human beings first.
Yeah, and that's something that I've learned through the podcast, as we've had guests come on that are maybe, villains. Like right now we're watching a show that is literally about villains, but they come on the podcast and we're like, oh, no, they're actually very nice, and that's happened, multiple times since we've started the podcast. But
I think it's important to remember too, with that, if you don't mind, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Even if someone said and did something that was shitty or out of character or not kind, that doesn't mean that defines everything about them. And that's what I think people also tend to forget, is just we've all said or done something stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something we didn't mean, or been reactive instead of responsive. So, I hope people can remember that when they look at people on House of Villains, or anyone who gets the villain edit, or you don't like them for whatever reason, like look inward and find out what's causing you that.
Yeah, it's true. And, when we make our mistakes, it's not on TV,
Exactly.
So is there an episode of your podcast that you would recommend, reality TV fans to start with?
Yeah. So I had Danielle on back in May. I think it was May. For 2 episodes. And I feel like if people want to get an understanding of like what was going on in our heads individually and collectively through our experiences, all the way from the moment we first met on the show up until, us not talking for 6 months and then reconnecting and having that conversation on the podcast. I think people should listen to that. I have so many with reality cast members. I have someone from Married at First Sight in Australia. Her name is Alyssa Barmundi. She got the villain edit. She's the sweetest person in the world. We had that, I think, in July, and I still almost every day get alerts on our shared reel clip from that episode of people hating her. I mean, it's been months, and she is, I'm sure she did something she regrets. That's for her to decide. But the amount of hate that I see her get, and when you hear her story and how misrepresented she was and how they edited things to look like something completely different than what happened, you can really get an idea of how these shows can manipulate you. It also gives you the realization that this is a systemic issue. It's a global issue, and it's not just something with one specific show. It's not just something with one specific production company. It's a systemic issue because there are no regulations and requirements for these productions to treat people, a certain way.
Right. And on a lighter note, you've had a few comedians on your show to talk about serious topics. So do you think that there is like a link between the comedy industry and reality TV and mental health?
I think the thing I've always liked about comedians is they take something that people might not understand or people might be thinking but afraid to say, and they make it funny so that it's okay to talk about. So I think it's natural that comedians do talk about cultural issues, do talk about things going on in our culture. They talk about mental health, and they even talk so many of them talk about politics, but they do it in such a relatable way that I think it's a great way, or a great talent that most of them have, to take these very challenging topics and make them funny and make them relatable and show that, hey, like, I might be a comedian, but I think this is pretty crazy too, don't you? And here's why it's funny. And so I do think there's that huge connection. I think that's a great thing that comedians bring to society.
And comedians have I'm back, by the way. Hi, guys. Comedians have some of the not craziest mental health issues, but like stories that they turn into comedy. Maybe craziest trauma is the right way to say it, but like that they are able to laugh at and really another way to help people. So I think that's a really great connection that you made, because it's not something that goes hand in hand of like comedians and mental health discussion. So I think that's really unique and really, really cool.
I think so too. And, if you think to everything with Matthew Perry lately, and I'm a huge Matthew Perry fan and Friends fan, it's my favorite show of all time. He's my favorite character probably of all time. And I think about like all the struggles that he had, and you can hear them, anywhere you look, especially lately, but he was able to be funny, and into the point where if you read or listen to his memoir, like, he doesn't even remember full seasons of the show, but he was so consistently funny, and his character was so good at like masking his character's trauma growing up with comedy. And I think like I look at that, and I grew up with that, and that's a lot of where I like got my sense of humor, was because I can be sarcastic, dry, and make fun of it. And so when I see comedians doing the same thing and doing it way better than I could ever do it because they're actually funny, it's very relatable, and I feel like I can connect with them personally because of that.
I know that we have taken up a lot of your time. So what I think we're going to do is skip over, and if we have time, we'll get back to it, but skip over the Instagram hot takes, whatever you want to call it. And then we'll go to
I'm sorry, I talked a lot.
No, please. This has been amazing. I'd rather, these are more of like a guideline of things to talk about. I should probably make it less structured because we do have all these other interesting things to cover. But I know we have fan questions, and people actually had really good ones. It wasn't just like, oh, Nick, like, what's your job?
You can give me those too.
And you've already addressed them in way more eloquent ways than I could ever hope Reddit would ask. So fan Q&A, I want to thank Reddit for submitting these, and Facebook as well.
You got them off of Reddit?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Reddit is a dark place.
Listen,
So
I selectively pull these questions. So
I just brave you for going on there.
Oh,
I
thank
haven't,
you.
I think I've been on like once or twice. I was on in 2016 for the election, and I was like, whoa, I'm never going on Reddit again.
It is a deep, dark dive, but you can find some communities that are really, really nice. The Love is Blind community is hit or miss, but they've so far been very kind to us.
Good, I'm
And
glad.
supporting the podcast. So we're very appreciative of that. And that actually, I guess, covered Jordan's question. So I'll just give a shout out to the person who asked about the subreddit specifically. He had some other questions, or they did. Luandry Machine. So thank you for that question. Nick asked, she had asked if you ever read the subreddit.
I had a few times on specific things that people would send me, but I don't proactively go on there. I know better.
Okay. The next question is from Ashley R811. Since Deepti said producers told her that Nick was your paper match, can you tell us more about what your first date was like, and if you had any others, what they were like?
So I had heard that. I didn't know that she had said that publicly. And I think I actually may have said it once a while ago, now that I think about it, in an interview. But so at the beginning, the first day, you speed date all 15 women, and the women speed date all 15 men. And you get like 7-8 minutes with each person, spread out, and you just go pod to pod. And there's only 10 pods. So there's, times where you have like time in the lounge. I remember our first date, and I don't remember what it was, but I remembered like I wasn't feeling it. I don't think she was either. I don't know. Not for me to say, but I think we probably went on maybe 2 dates before it was whittled away to other people.
All right. And that also answers Baby Elephant Walk's question. Would you ever date Deepti? So I think we've covered that.
Yeah, I didn't feel that type of connection there. Even at the beginning, it was a couple people. But I think she's by and large like a good person, again, means well. Definitely don't think I would ever date anyone from my season. I think that would be super weird. I don't have any desire to do that. So, or I should say anyone else, right? But anyone else from the season, that would be, yeah, I don't have that.
All right.
Okay. And our next question comes from Cotton Swisper. What is it about your participation in the show that you think turned employers away?
So I think I kind of answered that earlier, but I'll touch on it again. It was the stigma one around reality TV, right? People do ask like, oh, you have a podcast, you have a not-for-profit, all this stuff. And it's like, I'm a hustler. Okay. So it is, I work a lot, whether that's healthy or not, probably not, but I'm also passionate about some of the stuff. So, I would say that, but it's the stigma. It's a lot of the companies I've worked for are small startups. And, like I said, I have a public facing role where I'm going on podcasts for work. I'm getting interviewed about our products. And, when you have that association, there's a little bit of a fear of your ability to do the job. And then what if you have to work with someone who didn't like you on the show, or doesn't, like reality TV, or thinks a certain way about you because you did reality TV. And that's really where my struggles had been. A lot of people too, like there were a couple where it was like, I just can't risk it. Like there was one early in the year that was like a 5-person company. And they were like, I just can't risk my entire company becoming a headline about like your divorce, or a headline about, something you said or did. Even when I told my employer I was on the show, they were very supportive. But afterwards, afterwards, they were like, we were kind of worried, like we were going to watch it and find out that you're an asshole, right? Like, but people are like, no, it's just you, but you were on TV, and like, we're so grateful about that. So, I like to think, and like I said, I have a role now, I have for a few months. But it's just one of those things where I had to sort of learn how to position myself and lean on my expertise because I'm good at what I do. And then, just kind of even remind myself, like, this is a piece of me. This isn't all of me. This is something I did. This is not who I am. You can say I'm a public figure or whatever, but really all I'm doing is fighting for a whole bunch of other people until they can come up and fight for themselves. And it's, it's been a challenge, but that's kind of just been my experience was, taking a chance. And, people like to talk about it, not talk to me about it and, project what they feel. But again, it's like when you're customer facing, when you're public facing, you're almost like competing, right? As the reality show person, or, am I the expert in this specific type of software?
Yeah. All right. So our next one is from Similar Equivalent 4. A couple parts. What is your and Danielle's relationship like now? And what was something you learned from Danielle that you'll always take with you?
Oh, that's a good question.
Nice.
So we're cool. Yeah, we're cool. As I mentioned in the podcast earlier, you can kind of hear how we connected again and sort of water under the bridge and move forward without any negativity. I learned a lot from her. One of the things that I continue to be impressed with is how brave she is and how committed she is to, sort of staying and being herself, no matter what the pressures are. Cause there's just so many pressures. Like you don't even realize, another podcast, the pressures that come with all of this to change, to be what they want you to be what gets you more followers, to be what gets you more brand deals, to be what gets you, on more shows. There's so much pressure all around you to be this image or this brand. And she's just stayed who she is. And when she's strong and when she's weak or when she's struggling, like you get what you get with her. And I think that's admirable because there's so much pressure to change. And, I've said this before too. I got played as uptight. Like I'm uptight about certain things. Like I don't like clutter, but otherwise, like I'm pretty easygoing, go with the flow, except for, a few things here and there that I'm stubborn about. But, she really, like, we really had so much fun. And, that's the part I wish that they could have captured more. And I think they did a better job at After the Altar, but we just had so much fun. And, again, I'm not super like, stuck up or whatever, but she definitely helped me like chill on some things and have a little bit more fun.
I don't know. I didn't get like a super uptight vibe from you. I mean, I think I remember it was like the corn and the hot dog costumes, if that was the
That
right
scene's another one.
costumes. Like I can't imagine too many people being like, yeah, like this is what I do. And I just hang out in my costume and, have fun around the house and, do these wacky things. And then the other person being like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Like, why not?
Well, what's funny, and this is where like they made it seem like we were arguing. We were having a very tongue-in-cheek conversation in her very hot apartment. And they just like added dramatic music and like made it like, if I look at it and I'm like, I'm being so sarcastic this whole time when I look at it. But the whole point there is like I dress up still for Halloween every year, right? Like I have themed Christmas parties and all of this stuff. And they just like obviously didn't want to tell that story, right? I've got, you even go to my Instagram, you see I've dressed up as like Michael Myers several years for Halloween because it's my favorite scary movie. So it's just funny because like that wasn't as big of a, and she definitely wears more costumes and more often, but it like didn't,
but you have your fun too.
Right, exactly. And it wasn't like a deal breaker or something.
Yeah, and we'll share some pictures when we do the promo of the episode, like your Hulk costume and stuff like that, because I know we probably won't get to it. But yeah, you do.
That was my birthday party, by the way. That was my birthday party. We did the costume, the 80s theme for.
Nice. I did a Jersey Shore party once, and nobody came. Nobody appreciated my. That's a whole other mental health episode. Okay. Back to the show. This is from Internet Interpreter. What rules do participants have to abide by due to the reality show contract?
Oh, that could be
I
a
know
whole
you
nother
probably
episode.
can't cover it all, but like, what
So
are
I'll
some
cover
of the?
So they're going to vary from show to show. One of, I would say like the top ones, and these are different for me, obviously, because I got married, right? But there's, for specifically mine, you're not allowed to leave production without a producer's permission, or you're subject to a damages fine of $50,000. So when they say, why didn't you just leave? I don't know about you. I don't have 50K that I can just throw away because I want to leave, a reality show. There are rules around if you get married, how long you have to stay married. You have to stay married until the show airs. And there are conditions where you cannot speak out against the edit, even though they're allowed to misrepresent you, defame you, edit things out of order, out of context. And that's all written in the contracts. And if you go against that, they can sue you for $1 million each time that you do that. So you really are, and that's why it's so important that we have the National Labor Relations Board looking at this from like a federal government perspective, because we already have laws against defamation. So if someone's defaming you through an edit, we have laws that protect us as human beings from being defamed, right? We have laws in place that say you can whistleblow about your working conditions. We have these laws already. So it's just a matter of getting the classifications right, so that some of these things can be voided. Because, I mean, imagine being edited into a villain, completely misrepresented, and then being sued if you want to speak out against and say what actually happened. So those are the big ones that like come to my mind off the top of my head that I don't think a lot of people know.
I think I learned, at least from a prior episode, that I always assumed you guys were covered by SAG, by the Screen Actors Guild, if you wanted to join. And in talking about like the negotiations and how that was playing out with Devlin Wilder, who has worked on a lot of reality and production, like film and TV productions, you guys do not have those protections. You are not a part of SAG or AFTRA or anything like that.
We are not yet anyway. And they are actually in the contract. They state you cannot be part of a union. You cannot join a union, which is also illegal if you're considered an employee, because we have a right to unionize and speak about our working conditions in this country.
Yeah, it's a very it shouldn't be murky, but they make it murky kind of a deal.
Well, they do in these contracts. Like there's, I've read them to people before. Legal experts, all sorts of stuff. And they're just like run on sentences. You don't really understand the words. Like you got to kind of like reformat it in your mind so you can try and make sense of it. It's just very predatory.
And I probably already know the answer to this one, but Internet Interpreter also wants to know if there's somewhere they could download or read a copy of these contracts.
So that's a great question. I know that there is a leaked contract from Love is Blind season 5 out there somewhere. But that would be, I would say, if you Google that, you will
look,
probably be able to find it.
They're Redditors. If they go seeking, they can find, I'm sure.
They will find. It's actually originated, my understanding, from Reddit. So then dig a little deeper.
Yeah. Internet Interpreter, you should already know.
And I will also say for anyone who's interested in the labor side of this, the NLRB charge that I filed against Kinetic is publicly available through their website. You just got to look up, I think you can just probably Google Kinetic, because it's the only one that's ever been filed against a reality production company. So you can find that. And what that's going to do is show you the 30 plus ways that they potentially violated labor laws in the US.
So that's probably an even better resource for what they're looking for.
It'll be a little bit quicker than reading the 30 pages too.
All right, Jordan, I think you've got the last couple.
Oh, okay. So this is like a follow-up from that first question that we asked, or that we went over about Reddit, but they also asked if you read your social media tags, and if so, what are some of your favorite comments about yourself?
Oh, wow. I kind of post and ghost a lot on social media, especially the last few months, because it's just been, I say last few months, I'm like, it hasn't been good in like a year and a half. There's so many people that are choosing to be cruel through DMs and on comments. So every now and then I do. What makes me feel good are the people that are are supportive of what I'm doing with the UCAN Foundation, and people that recognize the work that goes into this and how challenging this is to be, you know, one of the first people to not just stand up and speak out about this, but to like actually take actions to change it. It's been very, I'll be honest, I can't help myself. It's been very isolating. And sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? Because, you know, even that story that came out where I spent 29 minutes talking about unionization and why we need, you know, regulations in reality TV, and, you know, the casual line of, I've burned through my savings because I'm having trouble finding a job and I'm going to be homeless because I can't afford my mortgage in 2 months. And they're making millions of dollars off of this, and I'm not getting any residuals or even check-ins. And that became like a headline. And it was like very tongue in cheek, right? And so that, and then like hearing all the commentary on that, and again, people talking about it, not talking to me about my experience, those things are like very hard, right? And they make me feel icky inside because I don't try to project my experience onto other people and make it theirs. So it's like those things are very hard for me, like to emotionally make sense of. And, you know, there's just times where I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm doing this for the people that, you know, a lot of them, and it's hard because the people you see, right? The people like Deep D, the people like Nick Bile, the people that are living this influencer life, right? And they're the ones that are at all the events, and they're the ones that are, you know, what was it, came out like making $1 million or $500,000 a year on you know, makeup tutorials.
That is,
like
oh my God. When I heard how much money people make, like influencing from these shows, it's insane.
Yeah, it is. It's insane. And it was like, so I see that and I'm like, why am I putting myself out there, putting myself out to be this polarizing like person? It's like, well, it's not for them. It's for all the people that went through this and don't have anything to show for it, right? It's for the people that have been exploited, damaged, injured, assaulted, you know, hooked on some sort of substance that producers were giving them. Like all of these stories that I hear, people whose lives were ruined, people who lost their businesses because of an edit and they got flooded with negative reviews and then they had to close their business, or people that, you know, were so misrepresented and they don't have any recourse. I want to take away those clauses for them so that they can speak the truth and take back their life and their story. And so that's when I see people recognizing the hard work and recognizing the idea that this should be better. That's what warms my heart, along with anyone who's like, oh, you're just like you are on the show in real life, because I am. And that was another thing, like all the pressure I mentioned earlier to change. Like I didn't change. You know, I stayed true to who I am, and I didn't get clouded by the opportunities for more shows, more fame, more money, or anything like that. And, you know, having someone see you for who you are and recognize the work that you're doing for the good that you're trying to do, those are the comments that really kind of keep me going and make me feel like I'm doing the right thing.
I mean, we definitely want to thank you. As much as we like to talk some trash, not about you in particular, but in general about these shows in our social media groups, I always say, like, you keep it there. You don't bring it to the cast. You guys are edited into characters on these shows. That's not
casted
who
into
you
characters.
are. Yeah. And you're dynamic people. We all do things that don't get seen to national audience every day, you know, from Netflix. And so no matter what, like, always lead with love. No matter what you think about the cast, please do not bring it to your DMs. Like, it's so inappropriate, the things that people say. And if you
could show you some stuff and you would your mind would probably be blown.
I'm sure. Like, I've heard of like death threats and like just crazy things. This is TV. This is entertainment. Like, and you guys are kind of made to be actors on these shows. So who you see on the show isn't who these people are in person, whether it's Nick or Shake or Deep D. Like, there's dynamics in different parts of everybody. So please.
And everybody is nuanced. Remember that. Everybody is nuanced. And that's the thing that I've realized, you know, everybody has issues, everybody has challenges, everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses and opportunities. So just, you know, look inward. And if you feel the need to say something to somebody else, I would suggest looking in the mirror, and I have to do it myself, believe me. Look in the mirror. Why am I feeling this way? Why do I want to say something about this? And you'll probably find that within versus outward. On top of that, I did want to add too, based on what you were saying, it's 100% the reason that we started a moveon.org petition, which is to add a disclaimer to every single unscripted show that says episodes are for entertainment purposes only, and the content can be edited, manipulated, and presented in any order for storyline purposes. And what that's going to do is remind people, when we get this implemented, remind people every single day or every single time they're watching one of these shows that you're watching something that is fiction. It's not 100% real. And I think that reminder hopefully will help level set people who get very invested and involved and emotional about this, which I think is a normal feeling, right? So, I think that's a big one that we're really going to be pushing for. We already have over 23,000 signatures on it, and we've just done one marketing push for it. So it's going to be a huge thing for us to really level set, and I think remind people in the industry.
And I'll definitely sign it. I haven't yet. But I think I am just learning, like, as we do this podcast more and more, I'm just learning. Yeah, these are not that you are real people. Obviously, we know that, but that these shows are really slotted to look a certain way. And it's not the way your lives are.
Right.
Once
and
you
as
get
the seasons
released
go
back into the wild.
Right. And as the seasons go on, they seem to escalate and get crazier and crazier. And this is again, we could talk for hours. This is what I've been thinking lately. And people should ask themselves this: why does every show I watch have a villain?
There's 10 of them now.
Edited into a villain. Right. And I bet there's going to be a super villain that comes out of that
every week. And, I think oddly enough, that show, it's like the polar opposite. It's even though there's these 10 villains in the house, and some of them definitely have like more of a villain edit, you see these like really likable sides to all of them that you didn't see on, or may not have seen on the original show. So it's really interesting, because I've been a longtime fan of a lot of the shows, and some of them I've never seen before, and I'm like, why are these people villains? They seem really chill. So even though
yes, you're already asking yourself. You're already asking yourself.
It opens up a lot of questions that I think we all need to consider more, and I appreciate that you're advocating for that.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate you guys. Really thoughtful questions, very thoughtful. Out of the box, a lot of them out of the box, which is good, because sometimes it does get a little repetitive, where it's like, okay.
Yeah, we figure
you could read my response to this on 50 other podcasts and 25 other articles.
Right. Why do we want to hear it again? Like, if you really we want to get into like what you're doing outside of the show, even though we want to hear about the show too. So, because again, you have lives outside of the show, and we want to know like what the next steps were beyond that and how it's impacted you. So thank you, Nick. And I'll let Jordan take over from here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We've taken up enough of your time. I want to give you a chance real quick to just promote anything that you want to promote, your podcast, anything.
Yeah, thank you. I hate highly recommending my own podcast, but I do recommend my own podcast, Eyes Wide Open. I talk, really about anything in the culture that I think has stigma, or that people hold biases about, myself included. I like to challenge myself with these interviews. We also talk to reality cast members who have had varying experiences from around the world. So check that out. That's Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. Also, the UCANfoundation.org or the UCAN Foundation on Instagram. Follow us, help us advocate, donate if you can, but really getting the word out on the work that we're doing and the change we're trying to make is the most helpful thing you can do for the cause. And then you can follow me on Instagram if you don't. It's N Thompson 513, or just search me. I get that. And then my TikTok is Nick Thompson 513, which there's sometimes exclusive stuff on TikTok, but TikTok is, I don't know. I don't want to become addicted to it, so I just post and ghost.
Jordan's all about TikTok. I'm
addicted to TikTok. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't I don't blame you. Like, I get it. And I do find myself sometimes scrolling because it just hits you as soon as you open it up. You're like getting content. I don't even have the option to like,
and it's
add
like
my
right
own.
for you. It's like, what do you want? We already know. We're in your brain.
There's this guy I follow on there now because for so long, every time I'd pick up, it'd be him giving like a 1-sentence life lesson. And it would just be like, every time I open TikTok, I'd get this guy's lesson. I'm like, man, I needed to hear that. And then, so it's just like all of those are like all I get now.
My boyfriend always jokes that our phones are always listening and like how creepy it is. I'm like, good, because if it saves me the trouble of having to find what I'm looking for, then great. Right? I don't have anything that interesting going on.
Yeah, that's the benefit is like, I love and hate it because I love when I'm like, oh, I don't have to look as far for something I'm trying to find. But I also hate when it's like, I was just talking about that. I'm not interested in buying it. Like,
yeah. Yeah. That, again, a whole nother topic. We would love to have you back, by the way. If you ever want to come back, we would be honored.
Of course. Yeah, anytime.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Oh, and then, yeah, I'm sorry. One last thing can I add about the, on Hulu, there's a special that came out in December about the unionization efforts of reality TV. And I highly suggest you go to Hulu and watch that. It's ABC. It's Nightline X. I forget what it's called. It's basically, it's a spinoff of Nightline, but it actually does like more views than Nightline on Hulu, which isn't surprising, I guess, because who watches Nightline? But
I do.
I'm more of a 60 Minutes kind of guy.
All right, fair enough. I'm more of a Dateline person myself if like I had to choose, but that's neither here nor there. Jordan, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you again, Nick, for coming on and talking with us. You've given me a lot to think about. I will say, like, I feel like I've been really quiet, but I've just been kind of taking in everything that you've been saying, giving me a lot to think about. And did you mention is it the moveon.org? Is that what the website is for the petition?
Yeah. moveon.org/reality. And I can give that to you guys too. But yeah, check it out. It's easy to sign. You can see exactly the disclaimer we want, which, by the way, the disclaimer is taking the words of the contract in my contract and just saying to the public, hey, we're doing this.
Okay. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that we had that, make sure people know to go and sign that. Thank you for being here. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you go and follow the LovePod podcast on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever we are. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
We love you. Nick, thank you
so much. That was great. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was so